to thank everyone for joining us today for this something that's really truly important. Every year, the Republican Study Committee produces a conservative, fiscally responsible budget that balances. For the last 4 years of Democrat control, we were the only budget produced in the entire House of Representatives. Now think about that for a second. Multi-trillion-dollar budget, and we produced the only budget. The Constitution specifically gives the power of the purse to the House. Yet the House has continuously surrendered that authority by failing to pass a budget. The President doesn't dictate spending levels, and neither does the Senate. We do. We'll never get our spending problem under control if we can't produce a budget. State governments, cities and counties, businesses and families, they all have to balance their budgets. They all have to live within their means, but apparently not here in Congress. Nearly every major problem facing our nation can be traced back to a failure to budget. The men and women up here with me today have put in a tremendous amount of work to produce this year's budget, and I'm proud to have Congressman Ben Cline leading that effort for us. You're going to hear from my colleagues about what's in this budget, but it all boils down to something we've heard the President say quite a few times this year. Show me your budget, and I'll show you your values. Our values are clearly on display with this budget. We're protecting life, we're defending our borders, we're strengthening our military, we're cutting taxes for working families, helping small businesses thrive, saving Medicare and Social Security for future generations, unleashing American energy production, and we're just getting started. I'm going to turn it over to the man who's led our budget and spending task force this year, my good friend Ben Cline. Congressman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, man.
I'll thank Chairman Hern for his leadership at RSC. This budget has been a long time coming. It has been the result of hard work by the Budget Task Force, the members you see behind me, as well as members of RSC who have authored legislation and submitted that for inclusion in the budget. It affects every part of this budget process and across our nation's economic health. The reckless policies of President Joe Biden and congressional Democrats has created a record $10 trillion in new spending in just 2 years, caused historic inflation, and forced massive interest rate hikes. The RSC budget would implement common sense policies to prevent the impending debt disaster, tame inflation, grow the economy, protect our national security, and defund Biden's woke priorities. It balances the budget in 7 years. It includes common sense reforms to reduce spending by over $16 trillion in 10 years. It cuts non-defense discretionary spending by $5 trillion over 10 years. Provides for the common defense and stands up to America's enemies. It ensures our military has the resources and direction to combat communist China. It defunds Biden's woke policies on abortion, CRT, gender politics, among others. It secures the border and builds the wall. It fights Biden's open border agenda and funds the construction of a wall on our southern border. It implements H.R. 2, the Secure the Border Act, as well as RSC-endorsed border security framework. It includes additional reforms such as restoring the public charge rule. It unleashes North American energy production and restores energy independence to our nation. It ensures American energy and security by building upon H.R. 1, the Lower Energy Costs Now Act, which creates jobs, reduces energy costs, increases wages, and lowers the deficit. It repeals Biden's crony taxpayer-funded giveaways to unreliable and expensive energy sources. It fights the weaponized administrative state and includes over hundreds of deregulatory actions and proposals to oppose Biden's radical expansion of the federal government. It rescinds Biden's funding for the IRS to harass and spy on hardworking Americans. It protects Americans from the radical woke agenda. It offers the most pro-life congressional budget ever, with dozens of pro-life member initiatives. It prohibits taxpayer funding for critical race theory and radical gender ideology. It fortifies religious liberty protections and First Amendment rights, and it protects our cherished Second Amendment rights. It empowers individuals through work and through tax cuts. It builds upon the successful work requirements of the 90s across all welfare programs It removes barriers to family formation, such as marriage penalties. It makes the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent, putting money back with American workers. It incentivizes companies to keep and add jobs in America through a pro-growth tax policy. And it saves Medicare and Social Security from the President Biden's destructive plan. It rejects Biden's plan to cut Social Security benefits by 23% in the next decade. It expands choice and competition in Medicare to lower premiums for tens of millions of seniors. And it adopts bipartisan measures to support Social Security solvency without affecting retirees in or near retirement. This budget is a common sense budget to restore fiscal responsibility for our nation. Again, I want to thank those members who have been so involved on the Budget Task Force for their hours that they have put into making this document so successful. And I want to recognize them now for comments as well. I'll start with our Communications Chair, Byron Donald. Is he here? There he is. Good job.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank, obviously, Chairman Hern and my colleague from Virginia for leading the RSC in its effort to actually creating a blueprint for our country to be stabilized. This budget balances in 7 years, not something you hear in Washington. This budget cuts wasteful spending across the board, something you don't hear in Washington. This budget allows our country to become energy independent again, something you haven't heard in this town for a couple of years coming out of the Biden administration. This budget secures our border, and this budget does something that people like to talk about a little bit, but we actually do it. We do it in a common sense approach, in a bipartisan approach. We actually preserve Social Security and Medicare in this budget. We do it with simple proposals that allow insolvency to be pushed off. Under Joe Biden's plan, his budget, Social Security and Medicare will go insolvent. What that means for every senior is a 23% benefit cut across the board. And instead of taking the mantle and doing his job or trying to find a way to avert that, he's ignored it. He doesn't even want to talk about it. In the RSC budget, we actually talk about it. And we come up with a simple way to preserve that program and at the same time give our country an opportunity to cut spending, get our fiscal house in order so we can begin to find the future ways of repaying our nation's debt. A society cannot live and cannot survive if we massively overspend and massively borrow. You're not going to be able to sustain yourself. And I know typically in this town you never hear members of Congress talk this way, but the RSC is talking about this. This is a real budget with real policy that makes our country more innovative, allows our country to thrive and succeeds, allows our people who want Social Security, our seniors, and Medicare, our seniors, to actually be able to sustain the benefits that they have and not have to have them be cut off and not caught up in the brinksmanship of DC politics. This is a budget that works for our country. And I would challenge a lot of my colleagues here in the House on the Republican side of the aisle to take time and review this budget and look at it and really come to support it, because this is a pathway to balancing our budget. I would challenge the Senate to finally do something over there. I'm not sure what they do, but to actually come up with a budget of their own, because it's important that we address the nation's fiscal issues. We cannot wait. We should do it now. And this budget is a great start. I fully support it. I would encourage my colleagues to do the same. And with that, I will hand it over to Rich McCormick, gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, sir. Why are we doing this? And what does it mean? If I could summarize the Democrats' plan, it would be just spend more, and not worry about the consequences of our actions into the future. Quite frankly, if we gave the Democrats everything they asked for this year, next year they'd be back with twice as much, because there's always a good cause to spend money on. The problem is, no matter how much money you tax people, even if you took away every billionaire's money, all of it, you wouldn't be able to pay for what they want to spend. It's unsustainable. And so we actually have a plan that has fiscal responsibility, that puts the money back in the pocket of the people, so we can have self-determination like our Constitution has benefited us for decades, for hundreds of years. But right now, with this responsible plan, we keep benefits in place that have benefited America for decades. But what we haven't done is have a pipe dream of things we can't pay for. If you look into the future and what we're going to accomplish with this budget, is we're gonna see something sustainable into the future, where if you look at taxing billionaires like the Democrats wanna do, and the way they wanna do it, billionaires will hide their money. We've shown that the more you increase taxes, the less revenue you get a lot of times. This actually gives you the ability to open up the economy that benefits everybody. It increases that tax base and puts people in charge of their own future, and especially benefits our children, who right now are gonna be hamstrung with even trillions of dollars of debt that they'll never be able to pay off, no matter how much they make. And that's gonna fall over to our grandchildren and future generations for decades to come. So I want to continue to push this, to encourage people to talk about it, to look at the details, because someone has to have a plan, and it is us today, and that's how the Constitution designed us. Thank you. And with that, I turn it over to Mr. Good.
Thank you. I want to congratulate Chairman Hern for his leadership, and I also want to congratulate him for selecting my colleague in my neighboring district, Ben Cline, for the chairmanship of this budget task force. He obviously was the right man for the job. And as Congressman Donald said, we challenge the Republican Party to bring this budget to the floor for a vote, and every Republican should support this. This is a pathway showing us that we can balance the budget, we can restore fiscal responsibility in Washington. It demonstrates members of Congress who are willing to make the tough decisions, to tell the truth to the American people, and do what needs to be done to save the country from a fiscal standpoint for our children and our grandchildren. A default on our national debt is a certainty. It is a certainty. We had the artificial scare tactics of the last couple of weeks, the last couple of months leading up to the debt limit. That was artificial and that was scare tactics. A default is a certainty, however. If we don't begin to cut our spending, the path we're on now is unsustainable. So in addition to cutting spending and making the tough decisions, the responsible decisions, this budget is a pro-growth budget as well. It recognizes we increase our revenue by getting Americans back to work, by keeping taxes low, by reigniting American energy once again. It is a budget that works on the revenue side. It also works on the spending side, and it is a blueprint for success for our country. It honors the #1 responsibility the House of Representatives has, and that is to protect the financial standing, the economic standing of the House of Representatives, protect our ability to meet our obligations, to pay our debts, to borrow when necessary. And I thank Chairman Hern and Chairman Cline for their leadership on this, and I introduce Mr. Eric Burleson from Missouri.
Thank you. I first want to say thank you to the leadership of Chairman Hern and Ben Cline, as well as Byron Donalds. We spent a lot of time in meetings gnashing over this, and I think this is an amazing product. Just 20 years ago, our national debt was $6.7 trillion, and at that point, it was still too high. Now it's $32 trillion, and we will most likely exceed $36 trillion by 2025. To put that in perspective, the average taxpayer owes $250,000 in taxes if we were to have to pay off the debt. So put that in perspective. Every child born in America today is saddled with a burden of $250,000 in debt that they'll have to pay back. It's clear that Washington doesn't just have a spending problem, it has a spending addiction. And it doesn't help that President Biden and congressional Democrats took every chance that they could to fund liberal pet projects at the expense of the American people over the last 2 years. It's almost like they were trying to imitate Oprah Winfrey with all of the handouts. The American people can't afford this, and they don't want it. And they certainly don't want their tax dollars going towards woke, weaponized, and wasteful spending. So aggressive action is necessary to get our country's fiscal house back in order, and that's why I'm proud to stand along these amazing colleagues today to present the RSC fiscal year budget of 2024. Our proposals balance the budget in 7 years, cut spending by $16.3 trillion over 10 years, and reduces taxes by $5 trillion. Beyond just the dollars and cents, it prioritizes what Americans actually care about. See, the RSC budget funds a southern border wall. It increases American energy production. It fully rescinds the funding of the new IRS agents, and it prohibits taxpayer funding from going to these woke and weaponized things like funding CRT and radical gender initiatives. It's time to cut the waste, pass a budget that reflects America's values, and put this country on a path towards a balanced budget. Again, I want to say thank you to the leadership of Chairman Hern, as well as Ben Cline and Byron for this. And now I yield to the gentleman from Texas, Congressman Pat Fallon.
It's not a Pat, it's Beth. Beth Van Dyne. Thank you all for joining us today. I hail from the great state of Texas. Texas is doing it right. Texas actually has a surplus. We have a rainy day fund. Since when have we had that in our country? When in the last 100 years have we had a surplus? We continue to spend in DC as if we're never gonna actually have to pay that back. When I was mayor of the great city of Irving, Texas, and on city council, for 12 years, we passed a balanced budget. Did we have people who wanted to spend more? Did we have staff who could show us a bunch of projects where we had to spend? Absolutely. But why did we do that? One, because we recognized that it was the fiscal responsible thing to do, but two, it was required by law. It is high time that we do that in our federal government as well. We took over the majority for a reason. The American people are sick of being taxed to high hilt. They're sick of the debt continuing to rise, and they recognize the fact that we cannot continue to do this to future generations. If not now, when? If not us, then who? We have a high responsibility to be able to do this for each of our citizens, and I really am very proud of the work of the RSC, that Kevin Hern, that Ben Cline and others have done to bring forward this budget, and I highly recommend that all of our colleagues read it, learn it, and support it. And with that, Doug Malfa.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Chairman Hern and all my colleagues with RSC. Just blew in from the committee, so I'm a little behind. Obviously, this document is very, very important to move forward and start tackling the incessant spending we've had and bring things back, bring the arc back down on spending to something that eventually can work towards balance. So I'm pleased to be part of the Republican Study Committee and with Chairman Hern and all of our colleagues to do this. 4 of my bills are included in the package that aim to protect minors, prohibit taxpayer funding of a radical gender ideology, prohibit taxpayer funds for President Biden's international agreements that pay for loss and damage due to climate change, and uphold American medical freedom. These are important issues for myself, for RSC, our Republican conference, and the American people, most importantly at all. The reckless policies of the Biden administration, the congressional Democrats have created a record $10 trillion in new spending in just a couple of years, resulting in historic inflation, massive interest rate hikes, and rapid acceleration towards a public debt crisis. This is why American people elected a Republican majority in the House, and I hope they'll augment that in 2024 to turn around the horrific direction our country's going on its values and certainly its fiscal situation. So let's reduce spending and get a hold of this unaccountable bureaucracy now and move in the right direction to prosperity once again and the American dream. Thank you. Now I will call on Josh Brasheen to come on up here. Thank you.
Josh Burkeen from Oklahoma. Grateful to another member of the Oklahoma delegation, Kevin Hern, and of course Ben Cline and Byron Donalds for their leadership in producing something that's courageous. And we have to have solutions for a nation that matches the size of our problems. And I think there are some people who, if they're honest, they look at this and say our financial situation is like the Titanic and they've given up hope. And what this budget is telling the American people, and thank you to those of you who have shown us that within 7 years, if we'll be courageous, there is hope. We are a ship that's taking on water. And we've got to stop being a Congress that keeps handing out spoons to solve the taking on of water. If you look at our overspend this year, it's about $1.5 trillion. If you go back to 1983, which is 40 years ago, that's the size of our gross national debt just 2 generations ago. Think of where you're at in 1983. Think about the optimism. Think about watching the Dukes of Hazzard or whatever. That sets a mood for you to remember how fast and furious we've fallen from a heightened state, where the size of 200 years of gross national debt in 1983 was $1.4 trillion, and this year we're going to overspend by that amount. And we have to have people that are willing to put their personal self-interest, their political interest aside and put the country's best interest ahead. And this budget says we can do it. It's not just the 31 trillion. It's what the U.S. Treasury report keeps talking about, and everybody keeps burying their head in the sand. We'll talk about the gross national debt, but we forget the unfunded obligation element. And this budget talks about all of it. And when you add the unfunded obligation, and the U.S. Treasury report last year says if you take the unfunded obligations of Medicare, Social Security, what we owe veterans, federal employee pensions, and you add it plus the 31.5 trillion, it's 124 trillion. And if you want to get flush with the House again, everybody that's a taxpayer write a check for $1 million. Another way of analyzing the U.S. Treasury report says it's 86% of all wealth in America. Everybody take all of your fixed assets, write a check to get flush with the House, you'll have 15% left. We have to have solutions to match the size of our problem. And liberals and moderates are learning the game of giving away free candy. It's good politics. But the health of our nation says we are choking. We are unhealthy. We are facing heart disease. We're facing tooth decay. And we got to start buying vegetables. We won't have a country left. Thank you to those men and women that are standing here going to move this agenda forward because they understand it's time to have serious conversations for serious people to secure the blessing of liberty for our kids and our grandkids. And with that, I want to call upon Coach Roger Williams.
Thank you.
Hey.
I'm not gonna talk about what I wanna talk about, but just kidding. I'll be brief, but let me tell you, I'm a business guy. That's what I've done all my life is be in business. And there's two ways to keep the books. You can cook the books, or you can balance the books. This right here balances the books. This gets our fiscal house in order. There's not a person out here that doesn't have to balance your books when you go see a banker, and you deal with your family or anything else. And this government has just totally walked away from the responsibility that this committee has taken on and is going to fix. And I totally support it, and Beth said it too. You know, states have to do this. Why don't we have to do it as a Congress? Why shouldn't America lead the way instead of not even following it? So, look, this is a good budget. Everybody needs to stand behind this. I congratulate everybody that's had a hand in it. It works. And like I say, are we going to cook the books or are we going to balance the books? I think that's the way we need to go. Thank you, Chairman.
Next up will be Financial Services Committee, French Hill.
Thank you very much. Well, this is a terrific piece of work. And for the 9 years I've served in the House, it's the only effort that comprehensively addresses the financial challenges of this country. And so I'm proud to support it, proud to be here. I've served under President Obama. I've served under President Trump. I've served under President Biden. And under none of those presidents have we had any serious engagement with this Congress on how to reduce spending, balance the budget, and fight about how to get to the lowest deficit of the year. How about when Democrats and Republicans thought zero deficits was an objective? Well, the pandemic did more than destroy families, kill people, and ravage the economy of the world. It ravaged the brains of a lot of people in this country that think you can keep borrowing and spending money and have no consequences. It's called modern monetary theory. And our former Budget Committee chairman, under Speaker Nancy Pelosi, John Yarmouth of Louisville, Kentucky, said that's actually right. That's the plan. It's perfectly fine. He adopted that. And what the RSC is saying and what House Republicans are saying is we want to go back to where we built a consensus around lower deficits, zero deficits, and get this economy growing and focused on that. I'm asked frequently as a member of House Financial Services, how do we make sure the dollar remains the reserve currency of the world? Because, you know, China's going to do that or some other make-believe place. The answer is if we take care of our business, like Roger Williams, and take care of our fiscal situation, we will be that reserve currency without question. We have the best legal system, the best regulatory system, the most dynamic economy, the most accepted currency in the world, the best business climate in the world, but what we don't have is the pristine fiscal picture we need to have. And that's why this plan innovates, prioritizes, and focuses what we need to do to have that fiscal future that we can all be proud of and leave a better country to our kids. So Ben Cline and Kevin Hern, thank you. And let me call up Marjorie Taylor Greene next to give her views.
Thank you for coming today, and as a business owner, this budget brought to the American people by the Republican Study Committee is very exciting for me. It's such a wonderful, experience, and I'm so thankful Chairman Hern, Representative Cline, and every member and staff that worked on this. Balancing the budget in 7 years is something to be proud of. It's something for all of us to be excited about. The Republican Study Committee is the majority of the majority. This is over half the Republicans in our conference that are supporting this great budget. It does everything by balancing the budget in 7 years, making permanent President Trump's tax cuts and savings plans, protecting our parents' and grandparents' investment in Social Security and Medicare, but it also takes care of our children. And I'm honored that my bill, the Protect Children's Innocence Act, has been included in this great budget because our kids are under attack today, and we have to protect them from the radical left's evil agenda that confuses children about what their gender is, that promotes these awful surgeries, causing mastectomies, hysterectomies, castration, for kids that haven't even grown up. They're not old enough to vote, they haven't gone to college, they can't join the military, and so much more of adult life and decisions. This also protects them from puberty blockers, hormone treatments, and I'm so proud that Republicans want to be the party to protect kids in the same way we want to be the party to protect the American people's hard-earned tax dollars, their ability to earn a living, support their families, and continue to live out their freedoms in America. Thank you so much, everyone that's involved, and we're going to take questions now. Thank you.
I wanted to let one more member speak, Tom Tiffany from Wisconsin.
I will be very brief. America has a spending problem. The United States government has a spending problem, not a revenue problem. But I just want to take my colleagues and all of you back to when I was first elected to the Wisconsin State Legislature in 2010. We had a $3 billion deficit. It is why I ran for office. It was unacceptable. People thought, we won't get out of this forever. I remember being out on the campaign trail in 2010 saying to people that if you give us a series of budgets over the course of a decade, we will fix this. And if you look at Wisconsin's fiscal health now, that is exactly what happened. It took some hard decisions. Many of you remember 2011, we had a little kerfuffle in Wisconsin state government at the Capitol, and but we made those hard decisions. And now the state is so much better because of it. And that's why I'm so pleased to be able to be included as one of the authors of this document that we have before us, because this is the blueprint. This is the roadmap to be able to get us in the next decade back to fiscal responsibility here in America, and we owe the